Hello, my name is Alfredo. Welcome to my piano space-time. This is the MIDI video of my performance of Sergei Rachmaninoff's prelude Opus 23 No. 7. You can find the video of my performance at the link under the video in the description notes. This video might be of your interest if you intend to study this work, as I will present a few thoughts and ideas about what I understood working on this piece of music. Let's start playing a few lines of this work and then I'll introduce a few thoughts. Let's start saying a few things regarding the context of this work. The preludes Opus 23 were composed by Rachmaninoff in the first years of 20th century. So we are in that time period of his life where he recovered his creativity after a time period of 4 years that followed the very harsh criticism that his first symphony met from public and critics, and that unsuccessful premiere resulted in a very hard blow to Rachmaninoff's confidence for his creativity and musical work. We read in his biography that it looks that it was very helpful for him to go through a session of hypnotic psychotherapy, and in fact we find that his second concerto has been dedicated to Dr. Tahal, that is actually the hypnotist that followed Rachmaninoff during the treatment of his difficult time period in those years. We are also, regarding the social context, in those years that are right before the first Russian Revolution. And we know that Rachmaninoff was coming from a family belonging to the Russian aristocracy, and that the class that in a way was receiving the attack by the rest of the society in the Russian country. We might plausibly imagine that the spirit of this work, that is quite full of tension, of conflict, might have been influenced or inspired, maybe unconsciously, by either the inner memory regarding the difficulties that Rachmaninoff went through for his creativity crisis a few years before, or perhaps by the tension that was growing in the social context of his life at that time. Or perhaps both things have contributed to generate the spirituality of this piece of music. Now let's move to the practical things that we should consider, in my opinion, when working with this work. Noticing the writing, a good way to start to kind of memorize and familiarize with the patterns in the texture is to group the notes in chords so that you take sort of snapshots of where the hand has to work for each quarter in the work. So that line that we would play is written as for the purpose of familiarizing with this intricate texture of notes, can be now played as a sequence of chords that would be something like this is, I think, a useful first step once again to familiarize with the keys that are under your hands throughout the long line. And also you will notice that the large majority of the score require alternating your hands across this progression of chords, and this actually make the work less terribly difficult than what might appear when listening to it. Once this step is done, I found that actually in order to develop a better control and fluidity, the next step would be to explore in these chords what is the splitting that will help your hand to be comfortable with a particular subgroup of the chords note. What I mean to say with this? Let's take, for example, bar 4. So the first 4 notes in the left hand. If we stop seeing, feeling what happens in our hand, at least if your arms work in the same way as mine, that is not necessarily true, as our anatomic shape and leverage ratios slightly differs from person to person. However, in my particular case, what I see with this chord is that if I want now to play individually these notes, I will find a different degree of ease with each particular finger along this brief line. What I mean to say is that if I remain with the idea of keeping my hand and body, how to say, frozen in that position that would be when I play these notes in a chord. Well, if I freeze all the degree of freedom that my body have when playing notes individually, actually I will find, depending on the notes, certain level of uneasiness or little tensions that won't be a good thing when you perform the work at speed. So what I think we have to do is to explore in that particular chord position how we had conveniently to split this group of 4 notes. So an idea could be the number 5 taken individually, and of course this help to call in action the entire arm. That is quite an appropriate thing to do, considering that we are on the strong bit of the bar, and so the large and powerful muscles of the arm are, I would say, rightly the tool to be in charge for the action that instead would be completed with the peripheric movement of your pinky, a quite weak and small finger to take that note. So once again, taking advantage of my entire arm mechanism up to the finger, I will take this note individually, and then I might find easier, more comfortable to think at the rest of 3 notes as a kind of all-together group where the finger control is easier, in a way more appropriate. So I am moving from that modeling of this segment as a chord with 4 broken notes to a chord that is broken in 1 note and 3 notes. And playing the 4 notes dynamically will call in a natural way an action of my entire arm that is beneficial in order to have continuity and good control of those notes. One last example. Let's take with the right hand, for example, at bar 1, the 3rd quarter, the chord would be. Now, if I want to put the individual notes in line, if I still consider them frozen in the position of my hand and arm, well, I don't find the exact same degree of easiness with each finger in that position. So in this case, I might think about this chord like a group of 3 notes and then the thumb. So with my arm, I think the first portion of the chord is resulting from a single action with my arm, and then the fingers that are very close to each other in a comfortable way, they can proceed with the notes, and a bit of help with the rotation of my hand to take the G. Now, I had to do that hard, complicated, natural job of expressing with the rational concepts and words what actually is a process that you have to explore mainly with your feelings, searching in all these groups of notes that you worked out as a first step to familiarize with the harmonic and melodic patterns. So we move to the process of searching the position of ease, the further splitting to find your body in a relative comfortable situation at each step of the progression. As it is often well said, we know that the score is not the music, in the same way that a map is not the territory. But depending on the era, on the time, and on the composer also, we find more or less accurate maps that tell you how to orientate yourself on the territory. For example, if we take a manuscript from Bach, we will find actually very limited indications others than the mere notes in the manuscript. Instead, here we are in the early 20th century, and in a time where composers, since some time in general, started to pay more and more attention on the details that they would put on their map, kind of give to you as much as possible information to then lead to discover what that territory really is. And this is certainly important for the musical understanding of the score of this material, and is also, in my opinion, important to lead us into the technical exploration about what to do in this work. And this is for the fact that Rachmaninoff, as we know well, was a superior, an excellent pianist, one of the greatest masters of the keyboard of all times. He has this natural talent, and as far as I believe, looking at the way he wrote the score, he also is giving a number of suggestions that are very valid, very effective under a merely point of view of the technical, tools to work out the musical message. Let's translate in practice. Well, you will notice in the score that there is a subgrouping of the notes that we already went through before in a way. And I think that in the large majority of cases, sticking with that grouping that alternate the sticks of the notes in the bottom with the sticks on the note on the top is actually giving a very effective, a very good suggestion about how to split the notes between left hand and right hand. You will notice that in the last quarter of, let's say, most bars, you find the last quarter splitted in two halves, with the first two notes with the sticks on the top and the first two notes with the stick on the bottom. I take this as a suggestion to split that last quarter between the end. So rather than doing, for example, at bar 1, it might mean a suggestion to try doing it might look a little, but considering the speed that the work requires and what you will be doing in the next page, that is repeating this semi-quavers long texture, but at that time alternating with your hands the long notes in the higher end of the keyboard and the long notes in the bass, taking those two notes with the left hand rather than completing the quavers with the fourth hand allows that tiny bit of extra time to get free from the keyboards and move your hand to take those long melodic notes with a tiny fraction of a second of time available, not to rush with a jump. So let's do it again in practice to be more clear, and then we'll go ahead with another thought. In here, it doesn't make such a big difference, but let's go to the next page. And so on. And another thing that I might say is that you can consider those two notes in the weak quarter, in the weak semi-quarter of the last quarter of the bar as an opportunity to charge your left arm mechanism in order to get down on the first beat of the next bar. So charging and strong beat. And this gives me the chance to underline that despite the high speed and the dense writing with these quick semi-quavers, we should work always to maintain the awareness that the control of the situation cannot be at the fingers of your hand that are your peripheric extremity in the playing mechanism, but instead your entire body that eventually has the core of the controls in your brain and eventually uses the strong muscles for the fundamental beats in the bass rhythm of the musical material. So to simplify in an extreme way, we might say, to spread this concept with a bit of clarity, that my arm coming in action with the strong beats of the bar and tend to leave the periphery, the action on the remaining notes, while your arm mechanism is getting ready for the next stroke. So exaggerating what I'm saying, much more complex and interconnected. So it is not only your arm that has a role, but the rotation, the wrist, the opening and closing of your hand. And these are all those natural things that we have to maintain in action by searching for ease, naturality, and freedom while we work on this intricate texture. Now let's move to another level of analysis, of conceptualization of your work. I believe that in general and in this piece, perhaps in a very particular and important way, it is important, can be important to develop a kind of symbolic reading or imaginative understanding of the music material. I will explain further what I mean. This is essential to avoid to misunderstand the work as a mere, fingering, complicated practice or a bravura exercise, but rather not to miss the fact that we have in front a musical material dense of emotion, of sensitivity, of conflicts, and this stays beyond the threshold of the mere control of your fingers. And so searching while working on the note by feeling the harmonies on your feeling on what those things are reminding you in your life, in your imagination, should lead to develop a kind of imaginative frame along the entire score. And together with helping to handle your emotional expressivity during the performance, this also, I believe, helps in recovering the focus and the concentration, especially considering that for the high speed and intricate texture, inevitably there is a part of work that is quite repetitive to do on the work segment. And in those situations, it's, at least for me, very easy to lose a bit of concentration and having actually your muscles and nerves and bones to do something that your mind is in a way looking at, while instead the process should be always the contrary, with your intention be the leading part, the director saying to the rest of your body what to do, how to adjust to achieve that musical image. So I think that this is a very important and though kind of intimate work. So I believe that is quite difficult, if not impossible, to provide from my end a kind of recipe on that. I will share with you just a couple of hints that might not work for you, and also to be clear in what I mean for a symbolic and imaginative narration of the work. Well, to me, these sounds, let's play once again. Sforzato that we meet at the very first bar, at the third quarter, and appears just there. Notice that this sforzato is not happening again in the next page, where this line is repeated exactly as it is, but with the addition of the long notes. You notice that we have the crescendo and the minuet crescendo sign, but without the sforzato in this moment. So, through the process of listening at this beautiful music, well, to me I was inspired to think like, that event at the very beginning, that's the actual tragic, painful event that suddenly appears in the life of our actor there. And it might be, I don't know, you can choose that as stabbing, or in a metaphorical way, a stabbing, a betrayal, but something that is inflicting a very deep and painful sorrow that might be in the body or in the spirit. And notice that the same note is kept being repeated, but without the sforzato, like what is happening here is the physical, the historical, painful action. And then there is the pain that keeps going on right after what has happened. But it's like the scene is not ended here, because there will be another stopping a few seconds after. Here it is. And here, in a way, to me, it sounds like here that we have a cry, perhaps a cry of help, or simply a cry of pain. And these very nice chords that create a transition towards the next page is a sort of loss of conscience, of hope, perhaps, and so closing the scene that has presented what tragic occurred. And now again, going ahead a little bit with this symbolic reading, we find the appearance of this long note that occurs on the top and on the bottom of exactly the same line. But as I said before, we don't have this forzato in those particular moments. So this suggests to me that now we are in front of the narration to the memory of what has happened, and processing, elaborating that, perhaps with a friend, perhaps with your own mind that is reconsidering, reviewing what was so painful and happened to you. But those lines that maintain the pain alive in a way, but is no longer in that physical, direct sense. It's kind of an echo of a remembering.